Turn our attention now to Queensland politics now. As we know, the election campaign now only has 3 weeks to run. Voters then head off to the polls. Certainly the LNP's still raging favourites. But last night, the two leaders went head-to-head in what some people have described as a fiery debate. Now, David Crisafulli made some pretty bold claims last night, including promising to resign if the number of crime victims did not decrease year on year under his leadership. Have a listen.
No wriggle room. By what date will we see that? Will you make that decision?
Well, you'll have an election within 4 years. It's set. And if there aren't fewer victims, I don't think I'll be in a very good position, Tim.
So you won't run at the election?
If there aren't fewer victims, you won't be seeing me.
Tim, so you'll stand out?
Yes.
I'm not sure it's all that smart to back yourself into that sort of corner. Now, the Premier, Stephen Miles, he accused Crisafulli of making things up during a heated exchange over the so-called patient tax. Listen, have a listen.
We're going to get rid of Labor's patient tax. Now, if you speak to the GPs...
no such thing.
Well,
there is no such thing, David.
Well, it comes after the election, which is what is so sneaky about it.
This is made up, David. David's just making things up.
Pretty entertaining, but who won? Who better to ask than our Friday regular former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman? I haven't seen him for about 3 weeks. Campbell, what do you make of that debate?
Well, I've come in for a bit of flack because I personally feel that Miles did better than expected, and I don't think the way that Crisafulli projected on the night worked for him. So I put it that Miles won narrowly. It's one of these funny things, Steve. It's like the famous sort of 1960 debate in the US presidential election between Nixon and Kennedy. Those who listened on the radio thought that Nixon had won. Those who saw the TV broadcast said Kennedy had won. Body language and the way that people project is really important in these debates. And I just thought Miles, you know, he spoke to the audience, in other words, down the camera, whereas David was literally debating him. And he didn't have to convince him. He's got to convince the folks at home. So it's small things that I believe gave him the edge. Crisafulli was making great political points. He was quite dogged about those things. And yes, there is for what it's worth, there is a looming increase in payroll tax that's going to hit GP clinics if they don't restructure their affairs. So that's what David was referring to.
Yeah, a similar thing happened in Victoria. What did you make of that political promise to resign if the crime figures don't come down during his first term? I mean, look, we all hope crime figures come down, but it might come back to haunt you, mightn't it?
Well, it certainly might. And, you know, I'm split down the middle when I see something like that, because there's been moments at the very beginning of my political career where famously or infamously I made some commitment like that to do with the council. But it's like this, you know, one half of me says, don't do it, you know, say something else, say you won't make that commitment, but what you will do is X, Y, Z. But let's hang on and look at it from a different perspective. Isn't it refreshing that someone is prepared to put it all on the line? I mean, he's got to be held to that. It's a pretty stark KPI, and he can be assessed on it. So really, you know, Steve, I put to you, perhaps we should all be applauding and wondering why other politicians won't put the proverbial on the line.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good point. Did your promise work? Did it happen?
Well, mine was to do with inflation and the way that rates went up in the Brisbane City Council, and average rates did go up in line with inflation. I believed I kept my promise, but I can tell you now my opponents flogged me forever saying, well, hang on, this house went up more than inflation and that suburb went up more than inflation, so you broke your promise. And of course, property values bounce around all over the shop. So, you know, these things are very problematic. I think perhaps David Crisafulli's commitment's very, very clear-cut.
As you know better than everybody, the last 3 weeks are absolutely crucial, and you can make big mistakes in the last 3 weeks. I mean, I guess, interestingly, Crisafulli's got a remain disciplined and not think he's already won this thing. And Miles has not got to give the impression that, well, I know I've lost and so I'm going to give up. I mean, that's not easy for either of them, is it?
No, it's not. But I'd say this, that Crisafulli will be disciplined and will maintain that. It's been quite interesting to see how he has operated. And by the way, we're just talking about the debate. I mean, it doesn't change anything. Let's be very, very clear about that. There were people in the LNP last night who were getting very upset because Newman had sort of said that Miles had beaten Crisafulli. But they need to sort of calm down. Crisafulli's on track to win. I, for example, back in 2012, when I debated Anna Bligh, everyone said Newman lost. Well, it didn't change the outcome. I don't think it'll change the outcome here. No one made a big mistake last night. I mean, that's an important thing. I mean, if someone had blown themselves to smithereens, well, that's a different thing. But that didn't happen. So look, the discipline will be there. I think Labor will mount their negative, or increasingly mount their negative personal attacks on David and try all sorts of desperate tactics. But I don't think it's going to change things at this stage.
You and I have seen some pretty big political blunders in our time. I want to get your thoughts on what happened yesterday. Stephen Miles caught out incredibly awkward moment out campaigning. Have a look at this grab here.
Susan? Yeah, of course, it's Susan. Yeah.
Premier, on CS Energy...
I was with her the other night.
Susan who? He doesn't even know her name.
Well... Sorry, Steve, I may shock you, but I sort of felt for him there. These things happen. Maybe it was a senior's moment. I'm sure he knew, but then he just at that particular moment in time, the name escaped me. And I think all of us in politics at that level have been there. We've all had a moment like that where you're sort of looking into the yawning chasm and thinking, I don't have that. Who is that person, or what was the name of that place?
I've been away 3 weeks. I've got a fear that you're starting to turn into a Labor operative. I never thought I'd see this. Clearly, you're part of a double act with Anastasia Palaszczuk. Have a look at this.
The two people who know Queensland politics better than anyone. Anastasia Palaszczuk.
We're here to break it all down without the political spin.
But with some healthy debates for old time's sake.
And Campbell Newman.
Here on Sky News Australia, Queenslanders can know they're getting straight talk that they can trust.
What's going on there?
Well, I don't know, mate. We better ask our bosses here on the network, the Sky News Australia network. All I can say is I don't know that it's going to be as harmonious as that promo would sort of imply. It could get fairly tense, I think, on a few moments as the night progresses. We shall see.
I just wonder whether Anastasia's probably going to take some joy sitting there watching the person who took over from her lose government.
Well, look, well, if that's the way the night goes, I mean, I think one of the big things is that I'll be pointing out is, well, hang on, yes, what a great exit. You left it, you sort of burnt half the building down and then handed over to Stephen with a garden sprinkler hose to try and put the fire out. I don't know that that'll go down too well, but it's going to have to be put on the table, isn't it?
It's going to make for great television. Campbell Newman, as usual, on a Friday. Thanks. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Steve.
Can't wait to watch that Sky News coverage of election.